Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Finnish-Swedish scene this finally sunny morning in Almedalen. We have a full day today here with defense and security, Finland, Sweden, and I really urge you to pick up the program and have a look at the many interesting things that we're going to discuss here today. We know that we are safer together. That's the theme of what we're going to talk about. Safer together is really something that's the core of also my institution's mission, Hanaholmen, who is trying to bring Finland and Sweden together in all possible fields, but especially defense, security, and societal resilience over the past years has been maybe the main red thread in our work. We have a fantastic panel here today. We have a fantastic cooperation with the Finnish Embassy, with 4C strategies that we've been working with for several years now. Thank you for that great cooperation. And we are so delighted to have this level of expertise in the room together at the start of this morning. The Niinistö report that's going to be at the core of many of the discussions here this morning is something that Finland and Sweden, to be safe together, can really work on also driving to implementation together. At Hanaholmen, we had an experience of presenting together with the representations from Finland and Sweden the report during its sort of writing, but also when it was ready in Brussels. And it was really amazing to see the respect that Finland and Sweden together receive from other membership countries, from NATO, from the European institutions in working on this theme together. So I really hope that we will continue to push for implementation and action together for the next year to come. And we also had a great opportunity a couple of weeks ago to have President Niinistö in the Swedish Parliament presenting his report and the follow-up actions together with Swedish parliamentarians. Also, that's a sign of how close this cooperation is. At Hanaholmen, we are driving the civil defense especially, and I just want to have a short marketing of the bilateral program that we are working on together with the great support from MSB. Thank you also for that, and partners in Finland and Sweden. And we're just about to kick off the 5th course of civil defense education with situational awareness, with scenario planning, and with concrete action planning between partners of critical infrastructure in Finland and Sweden after the summer. So a lot of things are happening, and I wish that we can learn today also a little bit more about what's to come from the insightful speakers that we will now start to hear. And with these very short welcoming words, I would like to invite our moderator, Minu, here to the scene from 4C Strategies, who's a very routine moderator in this theme. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. A warm applause for Gunvor. Well, as Gunvor said, once again, warmly welcome to this seminar. My name is Minu, and I'm very proud to represent 4C Strategies. And on behalf of both Hanaholmen and 4C and the Embassy of Finland, I'm also very honored to open up this important conversation that we will have here today. Today's seminar stems from a shared conviction that the challenges we face in Europe today demand more than national response. They require deep, practical cooperation across borders and sectors, and that is, as Gunvor said, why we are here together today. We take, as Gunvor mentioned, our starting point in President Niinistö's report Safer Together, which, if you have not read it yet, please do so, outlines a very clear agenda for strengthening Europe's preparedness and resilience. And the report is not only timely, it is actionable. It calls for a shared European understanding of risk and threats, stronger links between civilian and military preparedness, and institutionalized cross-border exercises. And these, my friends, are not just recommendations, they are necessary steps if we are to move from fragmented efforts to a more unified and capable Europe. This morning is structured in 3 parts. We have the honor to have a ministerial address from Sweden's Minister for Civil Defense, Mr. Carl-Oskar Bohlin. We have a keynote from Finland, delivered by Senior Advisor Turo Mattila. And we have 2 in-depth dialogues, the first on military interoperability, and the second on civil preparedness, featuring high-level leaders and experts from Sweden, Finland, and the private sector. We are delighted to have all of you here with us today. And with that said, it's my greatest pleasure to welcome Sweden's Minister for Civil Defense. Sweden's Minister for Civil Defense is a driving force behind Sweden's total defense policy. And we are very delighted that you have taken your time to come here and join us today. And please join me in welcoming Carl-Oskar Bohlin with a warm applause.
We have to handle that.
Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to be here and for raising this important topic. Ladies and gentlemen, needless to say, in front of this distinguished panels, we are facing a severe security situation that needs to be addressed in a comprehensive way. And it needs to be addressed, I think, with the insight that time is one of our most valuable assets right now, due to the fact that we don't know how much time and how long time we have. I think it's always a bit risky to talk about, we need to do this within 5 years or within 8 years or within 9 years or within 3 years. I think that the key focus right now in the work of raising our deterrence capabilities, as we can summarize it as, is to ensure that we have a sort of linear growth in our capabilities. And in this regard, relating to this topic, I think it is tremendously important that Sweden and Finland is joining forces to accelerate this work within the European Union. I sometimes, during these kind of these presentation, quote or recites the words of the Hemingway novel The Sun Also Rises, where the 2 characters speaks to each other, and one of them asks the other, how did you go broke for the first time? And he answers, gradually, then suddenly. Because I think that reflects also deterioration of the security situation that has been going on for quite some time. One can always debate what was the starting point of all this. Was it the cyber attacks in Estonia in the early 2000s, or was it the Putin Munich security address? Nevertheless, it has been going on in the front of our eyes for quite some time before we actually reacted to it. And that requires the insights that we have to move faster than the pendulum is swinging. So we have to make up for lost time. And Finland obviously has the benefit of not lowering the guard in the way that the rest of the Western world to a large extent did. Sweden certainly did. During the strategic timeout, which it sometimes is referred to, we transformed our society to a situation where we expected eternal peace. That was, of course, not very well reflected. And the bad news is that since 2015, when we unanimously said that the total defense in Sweden should be reestablished. Very little happened at first because there was no management attention. There was no additional funding being put forward to ensure the reestablishment of the civil defense as a part of the total defense. As you're all well aware of, the civil defense was totally dismantled and replaced by some sort of peacetime crisis preparedness. So very little happened before substantial fundings were starting to come in the wake of the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, where we all woke up to suddenly, in the sense. And I think it is very important to realize that the EU is even further behind, or many other EU countries is even further behind in this regard. And therefore, the Niinistö report is crucially important because it has started to set things in motion, because the EU has huge potential to potentiate this work that is ongoing in Finland, that is ongoing in Sweden, in the regards that we have a common legislative toolbox where we could raise the bar for every membership countries, where we can ensure that we make the same transition that we've been doing in Sweden for the last couple of years. And I would say that one of the most important ones is the cultural shift from the perspective that our military forces is an integrated part of our peacetime crisis preparedness, because that is the case in almost every EU country. So the military is counted upon as being a part of sorting out a crisis situation, where when you go higher up in the threat scale, the arrows go the other way around. So you need to make sure that the rest of civil society can funnel support to the military defense to ensure that the military defense can fulfill its task. And that is one of the most, I think, important shifts that needs to be taking place. We're trying to achieve that in Sweden, but we also need to do that on the EU level. And I think in that regard also, the Niinistö report is important because it notes that it denotes that this is actually the case, that we must have a civil-military cooperation that ensures the military defense capabilities to fulfill its core and basic tasks. And this also alludes to how we look on self-preparedness and home preparedness, because what is really the key objective on emphasizing home preparedness or individual preparedness? Well, it is not that everyone should become a prepper and a survivalist and run out in the woods and are never to be heard from again. The key point of this is that you should ensure that you on the individual level can continue to be an asset for the society in the event of an armed attack. You must ensure that you can fulfill that you can maintain a useful role. And that requires that you have a contingency planning on your own to ensure that you don't become a liability to the society or to the public sector or to the municipality, but that you can ensure that you can actually fulfill a certain task. And I think that is also one of the key cultural shifts and perspectives that need to take place very, very fast. And that is ongoing in Sweden, and many other EU countries is lagging behind Sweden and Finland in this regard. And I think that not only Finland and Sweden, but the Nordic and the Baltic countries can potentiate this work if we join forces, which we actually are trying to do. So we met a couple of weeks ago with like-minded nations, the Nordic countries, the Baltic countries, and the Benelux countries, to see how can we drive this work, how can we ensure that the work with the Preparedness Union is going as fast as is possible, because this is a key part of our deterrence. It is a way of creating a credible deterrence of denial. Russia is obviously a country who has an affinity for weaknesses. The defense researcher Gudrun Persson once said that Russia is like a hotel thief. They go around from door to door and they will go in through the door that they find unlocked or open. And it is our obligation to present a society with no unlocked doors. And that requires a very comprehensive approach, because many of the threat vectors, or perhaps all the threat vectors below a paragraph 5 scenario, is targeted almost directly towards the civil parts of society. So if we cannot present a robust and resilient society, we will be exploited. And that is something that we can never accept. And I think that the realization or the insight with regards to how problematic this is obviously bigger the closer you live to the problem. And the Nordic Baltic countries, alongside with Poland, we obviously live very close to the problem, and I think we share the same insight of the magnitude of this problem and the fact that it is systemic. It will not go away in a near future. It is something that we will have to adapt to and adjust our societies accordingly to ensure that we can live the lives that we want, that we can maintain our model of society. But that will require substantial investments, but also using the legislative toolbox. And I think that the Niinistö report in that regard is a very good first step to ensure that the EU countries follow suit, but we will have to be the key driver in that work. I think that will be my initiating remarks. Thank you.
First of all, Minister, thank you for sharing those important insights. I would like to continue with a few questions based on the report. The President Niinistö's report emphasizes the need for Europe to strengthen its strategic coherence and crisis response capacity. In your view, how can Sweden best align its national preparedness efforts with both EU resilience initiatives and NATO collective defense framework without duplicating structures?
Well, first of all, and this might sound a bit counterintuitive, we should never compromise with our pace if surrounding countries is not moving at the same speed as we are doing. We should rather set out the pace to inspire other countries. So, and that relates to your question in the sense that, well, harmonization is always good, but it should never work as a constraint for what we're trying to achieve. That is very important. Where we now, for example, last week when we presented the largest, I think, the single largest investment at one time in security of supply. Should that be harmonized? Well, maybe not. It should be an inspiration for other countries that needs to follow suit. With that said, I think we should work with our common institution, for example, developing the EU civil protection mechanism, ensuring that both the civil protection mechanism and the rescEU forces can be more transformed into also handling and sustaining the consequences of long-term conflicts. I think that is necessary to adapt. And in that regards, there's obviously potential for harmonization.
Meaning that harmonization depends on the question, basically?
Yeah, meaning that harmonization can never be an argument for the least common denominator. So we must never compromise with our speed and with our trajectory just because we cannot get a common understanding around everything that we do in Sweden. With that said, we should always be driver on raising the bars in general when it comes to joint frameworks, for example, putting demands on resilient work on EU level.
That's a great answer, thank you. The report also stresses the importance of that resilience begins in the society with individuals and communities, and you address the importance of home preparedness and the meaning of that. What concrete steps do you believe that, and I know that under your leadership we have done a lot in regards to communication towards individuals and local societies, but what do you believe that we can do more in order to encourage active participation and individual leadership in the civil defense context?
Well, first of all, when it comes to home preparedness, and I mentioned it briefly, I think it is important to also there raise the bar. Well, I had the great honor of being visited by the Preparedness Commissioner Hagelstam, and also when we met in the like-minded group. I think that the demands today, where EU says 72 hours, that is way too low ambition. I mean, everyone could do 72 hours almost standing on their head. That is not a specific requirement. If you just have access to water, you will survive for 72 hours. We should, push the envelope, not to specifically drive a sort of prepper culture, as I mentioned, but to get the perspective of into people's mind that there might come a situation where you need to face very harsh circumstances, and there should be a mental and physical preparedness for such a scenario.
It feels like Sweden and maybe Finland as well is facing a mental shift that we need to do.
Hopefully, yeah.
Given that both EU and NATO increasingly emphasize civil preparedness as a part of overall resilience, how do you see that Sweden ensuring that our civil contingency structures are both interoperable and not just nationally but across borders, for instance with Finland?
Well, I think with regards to Finland, we're doing right now everything we can to strengthen our cooperation, and the government meeting, the joint government meeting between Sweden and Finland almost a year ago was obviously one of the launching point for that cooperation, where we signed a memorandum of understanding, or letter of intent on increasing cooperation, and after that we've seen numerous actions where MSB has formed coalitions with its counterpart. I had the opportunity to lead one of the largest enterprise delegations to Finland to study their work with security of supply, because I think there's really potential for a very good amalgamation between our two countries, in the sense that Finland has a system that is up and running, and we can learn a lot from that. But Sweden is building up something new, and that obviously also holds potential, because we hopefully then don't face constraints of old structures. And joining this together, I think there's really potential for both countries to be beneficiaries from this cooperation.
That's a great answer. If we should do a joint, summarize this by doing a joint exercise here, and I will give the minister an opportunity to state a wish list in regards to the civil defense structures in Sweden, what would that be?
Well, on top of the wish list right now, and we are already on that trajectory, but it's of course going from the sort of PowerPoint phase of planning into physical investments that increases resilience and robustness, and that should be on top of the agenda for every response for every sectorial agency, for every preparedness agency in Sweden to ensure what can we do here and now that will increase our resilience and robustness and redundancy. That is on top of should be on top of everyone's priority.
Let's take notes on that one. Minister Bohlin, thank you so much both for taking time and for your clear and strong leadership in order to strengthen Sweden's civil preparedness. We are very grateful for having you here today. Please join me in thanking the Minister.
Thank you. Thank you.
With that said, we now turn to the European and Finnish perspective on strategic resilience. Our next speaker has a deep experience from diplomacy at the EU level. He has played a crucial role in both shaping Finland's voice in European preparedness discussions and continues to push for integrated approaches on resilience policy. Please join me in welcoming Turo Mattila, Senior Advisor and European Correspondent at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in Finland.
Tack så mycket, Mino. Ärade statsråd och ambassadör, bästa åhörare, dear colleagues. So I presume that I am in front of you today because last year I had the honor and the pleasure of working with President Niinistö as his advisor when he was preparing the Safer Together report. So the starting point for the report last year were 3 simple facts that have become clear in Europe in the past 3 years. First, that peace is not guaranteed to last, that maintaining our way of life in a free Europe does not come for free, and thirdly, no one has more at stake in security in Europe than us who live here, Europeans. So these were the guiding principles for President Niinistö in his work last year, and since the report's publication, I think we can all agree that its relevance has only become clearer. If you look at everything that the Russian leadership is doing and saying, it confirms the existential nature of the threat posed by Russia. And also the messages coming from the United States about the need for Europe to take a bigger responsibility also within the transatlantic alliance for its security is very clear. Nothing new, actually. If you look at the history of transatlantic cooperation since the Second World War, the discussion or the debate of Europe needing to take more responsibility for conventional defense in Europe has been a consistent part of transatlantic discussions since NATO's inception. But President Niinistö was clear in his report that Europe needs to wake up. I would say that the message from The Hague, from the NATO summit yesterday, was very clear that Europe is now awake. So the commitments are there. The bar has been set very high, including with the new spending targets agreed in the NATO summit yesterday. So we are now moving at a phase also within the EU of implementation. We, the Nordic countries, are in many ways setting an example. We have already taken, like Finland and Sweden, decisions of increasing our defense spending. Also, in both relative and absolute terms, the Nordic countries are among the leading supporters of Ukraine. We can see that the comprehensive security model or totalförsvar that we have in Finland and Sweden is these days a subject of great interest from other parts of Europe. In Helsinki, numerous high-ranking delegations want to visit the underground shelters that are maintained for population in case of war or serious crisis. Other European colleagues are asking us best practices on how to make public sector and the private companies work so well and so closely together on security as we do in Finland and Sweden. And also in several European countries, there's an active discussion on whether to and how to reintroduce conscription or compulsory military service, something that we have had in Finland throughout the Cold War decades and something that has been reintroduced in Sweden. But on European level going forward, I would concentrate today on 3 key issues that are crucial for commitment or implementation of the commitments that have been made and the success of Europe in meeting the high bar of Europe taking a bigger role in security and defense. The first is long-term commitment, or should I say perseverance. Second, efficiency, and third, citizens. First, on the need for a clear long-term commitment. First of all, I mean that we must show with what we do in Europe that Putin is wrong in his belief that we Europeans or Western people in general would be weak. Somehow it seems that the Russian leadership estimates that despite all the hardship that the war of aggression against Ukraine is causing to Russia, and all the economic trouble that our sanctions are causing Russia, somehow time would still be on Russia's side. Because Russia wants to show that they are comfortable in this confrontation between Russia and the West, while they believe that we in the West are weak and that we would sooner or later get exhausted with this confrontation, get exhausted with supporting Ukraine, and become so frightened of the risks of the current security situation that Putin believes that sooner or later Europeans would be ready to make some concessions. Well, we will not. And we must keep on showing with our actions that Mr. Putin's calculus has been completely wrong from the beginning and will remain so. This also requires a long-term commitment to change the way we do policy within the European Union in terms of not seeing defense and security as some isolated part of policy making, but understanding the key role that actually all the sectors of EU cooperation, of EU policy making and legislation also have from the perspective of increasing our security and preparedness. Because one big advantage that the EU and Europe have, for example, compared to Russia, is scale. Our economy is 10 times the size of Russia's. But to use that to our advantage, it means that we must be better at bringing together all the necessary resources from across different political sectors, and also taking a security conscious perspective on everything that we do, also within the EU. For this reason, I think that one of the most important recommendations of President Niinistö's report in concrete terms was to propose that in all impact assessments of new EU legislation or policy initiatives, security considerations should be added, because these days, when the Commission is preparing new proposals for EU legislation, they take into account social, economic and environmental impacts, and it's important that they do, but I would say that security should definitely be added to the list. And this does not aim at a militarized society, but this means making sure that our societies and economies are prepared to function and deliver also in times of serious crisis. We have to do this kind of concrete things with a long-term perspective in order to show to our citizens, to our allies and partners, as well as to our foes, that we are in this for the long haul. We are not increasing defense spending because of the headlines of today, but because we want to keep an even bleaker future from becoming a reality for decades to come. And the second point I want to make concerns efficiency. This is particularly important because in the years ahead in Europe, the biggest increases, or one of the biggest increases in many national economies in terms of public spending, will concern defense and security expenditure. It's a well-known fact that European defense industry is still not as efficient as it should be. In Europe, our defense industry still lacks sufficient scale in production capacity of many key capabilities that we need. And we must also learn to bring innovations of new civilian technologies to the defense sector more quickly. Now, I'm not an economist, but to my understanding, if there is an inefficient system, it does not automatically become more effective just by pouring in a lot of new money into it. So this means that also not only the amount of investment we make, but the system that directs how that invested money is used to the biggest possible advantage as efficiently as possible must change. This is now an interesting situation because historically, in many cases, what maximizes efficiency has oftentimes been resource scarcity. And look no further than Ukraine's successes, for example, in its own drone production during the war. In Europe, we must now improve efficiency in sync with increasing resources. And to make this happen, the initiatives or the new financing tools that EU is providing and the incentives therein for more cooperation and better cooperation on defense industrial cooperation are of particular importance, as well as close participation of our closest non-EU partners. Using every single euro that will now be spent on making us more secure and better defended is an obligation to European taxpayers. And third, and probably most importantly, the role of citizens in this. We are well known for the Nordic approach on security that in a way starts with strong social cohesion, that we trust each other and even the people who lead us. And we believe that despite all the differences between different political groups, at the end of the day there is a shared belief that free democratic societies are something worth defending. And also that securing them, defending them, is an effort where everyone in our societies may be asked to contribute, may have a role, must be ready to have a role in different capacities in good times as well as in a crisis. But on European level, the social cohesion is tested much more in many ways than in the Nordic countries. We must remember that the consequences of Russia's full-scale invasion in February 22 and its consequences like rising energy prices and high inflation came on top of the preceding crises, financial crisis, migration crisis and COVID crisis. In most European countries, the number one concern of voters is not the threat posed by Russia to Europe, but the state of public health care, housing prices or youth unemployment. We have all already seen signs that in some European countries it seems that the new defense spending target will become a politically contested issue. It feels that in many parts of Europe, like President Niinistö wrote in his report last year, people have learned to take security and freedom for granted because it has lasted so long. Not that long ago I read an article about an opinion poll that was carried out in a big Central European country that showed that there was a strikingly low level of motivation among the population to defend their country. There was a young man that was interviewed in the article who said that life under occupation would probably suck, but I would rather take that than risk my life for my country. So like President Niinistö wrote in his report, it seems that security is something that is very non-concrete or difficult to grasp as long as you have it. But security becomes very concrete the moment you lose it. So now it's first and foremost a question of political leadership to inform citizens truthfully, but without fear-mongering, of the reasons why our security and freedom must not be taken for granted, why more investments are needed for better defense capabilities, because they must match the level of threats we are facing. And they must be made even when they mean that difficult decisions must be taken. Because a broad political understanding of the reasons why Europe must step up on defense and security is necessary. And to get there, we must remember the close interconnection between economic growth and security, because only a competitive and prosperous Europe, growing European economy, can afford the investments we need to keep ourselves secure. Economic growth is necessary as one element in meeting the targets that have been set. Because at the end of the day, it's not just the 3.5 plus 1.5% goal of GDP. It matters a great deal to our actual defense capacity. What is the size of the GDP, of which we have committed to spend 5 percentage points? And secondly, only a secure Europe in today's increasingly unstable, unpredictable security environment is a place that will attract investors and can provide a good environment to start and grow a business, something that we definitely need in Europe also for our security. And finally, a Europe that offers its young people in particular a chance for a bright future is something that people will be sure to be committed to defend. So for us Nordics, the task now is to make sure that we keep on leading by example, walking the walk, and in doing so we also make a strong contribution on the European level. And while the times we are living in are dark in many ways, there is no reason for pessimism. I mean, we have all the resources necessary to make Europe stronger on security and defense, a stronger European contribution within NATO and the transatlantic alliance. Making it happen is a question of will to do it. Preparedness costs money, defense is expensive, but not taking it seriously is unaffordable. Tack för er uppmärksamhet.
Turo, first of all, thank you so much for taking time coming from Finland to join us here today. We are very happy for that, and thank you for your insightful remarks. I wonder, which part of the Safer Together agenda do you believe is the most urgent if I force you to choose one part of it, but also risks being overlooked?
I would say that, thanks for the question, Minu. I would say that in many ways it has to do with the involvement of European citizens in the task at hand. It's not only about the political discussions and setting the priorities and making the decisions on what it means in practice that defense and security are now a key priority, should be a key priority across Europe, but it's also the sense of European citizens in their own involvement in making us more secure. I mean, there are also some concrete gaps that we have in Europe. The European Commission estimated last year that there are up to 1 million empty vacancies in Europe in the coming years in cybersecurity, both in the private sector and in public administrations. Also, we know that many European defense forces have had difficulties in recruiting the needed numbers to meet their commitments. And also, there is a demographic challenge in Europe. I mean, here in Finland, as well as in Sweden and many other countries, the share of the working age part of the population is shrinking, meaning that to fill the gaps of experts and people who in different capacities in the public sector, private sector, in uniform or in civilian roles, work in security and defense-related professions is not that easy to fill. Also, one key issue is to make this kind of career options more tempting and more interesting for young Europeans. And how to do it is, of course, ultimately a responsibility of every single European nation on national level. But I'm sure that there are some best practices that could be shared. And also, in many parts of Europe, defense and security is still seen as something that concerns only part of the population, something that would somehow be isolated to the people who do it on a professional basis. So that's why, for example, the examples of the 72-hour emergency reserve and other examples that Minister Bohlin gave in his remarks are very important to increase the understanding across Europe among the population, that they also have a role to play in keeping themselves secure and contributing to the security of their home countries, societies, and our European community, broadly speaking.
Meaning that it all comes back to leadership, the ability to communicate, and also the sense of responsibility for a collective security.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Once again, a warm applause for Turo. Now, my friends, it's time to move on into operational realities. It's time to welcome my great friends, Brigadier General Sami Nurmi, warmly welcome, and Vice Admiral Eva Skog Hasslum, a warm applaud. We have had several opportunities during Almedalen Week to talk about these issues together, and I would like to end the sessions by a really hard question. So my first question would be for you, Eva. How do we, in the context of what we have talked about this morning, prepare for strategic surprise and not just known threats?
Wow.
So this was the difficult one, or the easy one?
That was the easy
That was
one.
the easy one.
How have we prepared? To start with, thank you so much, Minu. This is the third time this week we're standing here together. Different questions, though. Of course, we are prepared. To start with, both Sweden and Finland, we have had a national plan throughout the time. We're talking about the strategic timeout and everything, but we have always had a national plan. It's actually not all European countries that have that. So despite we were non-allies, or because of we were non-allies, we actually were urged to have an own national plan to protect our own country and the territorial integrity. And the last 10-15 years, we have had the plan together. So Sweden and Finland together have had a very strong plan beyond peacetime. So we have been prepared to actually act upon each other territories, which also add us into NATO now as two strong allies.
That's a great answer to a hard question.
Thank you.
Sami,
Fully
go ahead.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Something to add on. Hard to do that. First of all, good morning, everybody. Good to be here again, and good to see old friends, Turo from EU times in Brussels and so on. I would like to come back to that time as well, if a possibility is given. The difficult thing with the strategic surprises is Russia, of course, because Russia seems to always surprise us, even though we prepare as well as we do. And I feel it's partly due to the fact that the Russians understand the holes in our legislations and functions better than we do ourselves. So they constantly follow and adapt and find the holes and surprise us. So this is something that I would say that we really have to carefully study in the future to find the holes in our legislation, which is connected to national legislation, first of all, which is connected to security and defense, but then also on the EU level, that we are not surprised as a union.
That's also a great answer. The report, or President Niinistö's points, states the risk of fragmented response during really hard times. What mechanisms, based on the plans that you mentioned, Eva, or habits of cooperation do we build more upon? What do we need to do better together, or maybe safer together, in order to have a hard response on hard threats?
I think we have started really great. We became allies. That is one start, which makes us so much stronger together. But also saying that we were non-allies before, that also actually meant that we have kept our capabilities. What we now are doing is also raising the capacities. So increasing the capacities, which we are doing. We have I don't say defense spendings, I say defense investments right now, because we have huge investments ongoing in both countries. And that is not, it's not any certain specific new capabilities, but new capacities, so we can have a more long-term planning ongoing and not alone.
Thank you. Sami?
Yeah, fragmented response, if you're talking about the EU, I think it was really important point that Turo made in the end is the awareness and understanding of what EU, for example, is doing and capable of doing. I worked in the EU military staff for almost 3 years in the European External Action Service, and I kind of figured out the rule that when you start understanding about 30% of EU matters, it's time to come back home, because otherwise you start talking the EU jargon, which brings me to the point that for the military, for example, in the European Union, to understand what mechanisms are there to be used, for example, for financing. You have this, is it Commission, is it the member states? There's so many actors in the EU that we are not always sure that which one is the most usable at which phase. And I think to add on to the clarity and understanding of EU, we will need concrete steps, now results on it doesn't matter which area it is, but just to show that EU is doing this and that, and they can do it. And this would be really important, and I think that would bring us again closer together in the EU. And don't get me wrong, there's a role for both NATO and EU in Europe, and they both have their own roles. NATO is military alliance, and EU has a lot of tools that NATO doesn't have. For example, the legislation capability. So both have really important roles in Europe.
So if I ask you the same question that I asked the minister, how do we ensure that NATO and EU from a military perspective really work integrated? What is your view, Eva?
I think we are doing that already, but of course everything can be improved.
Yeah.
And of course talking about money, which often we do, especially with the EU. I know that EU are talking today about consolidating. I don't hope that consolidating means that you are going to build one certain system in each country, because I don't believe in that in the long term, but maybe working more together so the defense industries can work more together. I think that could actually improve our capabilities about producing new and procuring new assets to our defenses in EU. So consolidate should not mean that you are actually one solid company, private company, for example, providing fighter jets, to have one example. But I mean, really working together with fighter jets producers in Europe instead.
That's great, Sami.
Yeah, it's a really important issue, the cooperation between EU and NATO. And unfortunately, almost always in the beginning, it runs into the political question that you have, everybody knows Turkey, Cyprus, and so on. And it gets challenging, even though there is a possibility to, and need to work together more. I think an excellent example of the cooperation that is working is military mobility. And that's concrete initiative that is working. And it was originally a NATO initiative. And NATO quite soon realized that it does not have the tools to enhance military mobility. It cannot affect member states' legislation. So they came to EU and asked EU to move forward with military mobility. And that's a really concrete, good project that gives money to nations and improves security and defense at the same time.
That's a great example. And on the topic of that, extract from what the minister said, the importance of leadership and communication and doing this really integrated and not just saying that we want cooperation.
Yeah.
How do you believe from a military perspective that the importance of communicating what we do and how we do it has increased or developed during the last years?
Of course, and that is a part of NATO's strategic way of working, because the deterrence and defend, which we now are 24/7 ongoing. So in the deterrence, that must be very, very strong, and that message should not just be a empty bottle, because you really need to prove that you are deterring. And we are deterring by growing stronger and working together in so many ways. And NATO is one organization we work in, but we are also very, very much focusing on what's happening pre-Article 5, and we need to be strong there as well, because otherwise that is the open door which Russia will actually go in through. So we need to fill up those open doors and lock them even pre-Article 5, which we are doing. With different, JEF is one example, the Finnish-Swedish cooperation is one, the Nordic countries, the 5 Nordic countries are cooperating together. So that is a communication message, very, very strong, that we send all the time, that we are working together in so many different ways, which is hard for Russia actually to assess and to meet.
Which is also super important in order to own our narrative about our defense capabilities. I had the pleasure to listening to the Supreme Commander yesterday, and he said that we are here in full force in order to also own the communication perspective about what we do and what we not do. Do you agree with him?
Exactly, and it's not about only protecting Swedish territory today. We are actually increasing that communication, say that we are going to have control in our region, in our area, and the NATO eastern border is eastern Finland and down through the 3 Baltic states eastern border as well, and we are supposed to have control in that area. So it's actually even bigger than we mentioned before, only talking about territorial integrity.
Thank you. Sami, do you have any perspectives on the communication part?
Just that it is a really big thing, and I refer to my earlier statement about making these concrete and understandable to the citizens. And I would also really emphasize that the understanding of different roles, NATO and EU, and of course no duplication is a self-evident issue. But I'm not a big fan personally of the terms European Army, European NATO. I think NATO is NATO, EU is EU. But then on the other hand, even though we're not talking about European Army or European NATO, we have, I think, a positive thing now, unfortunately, due to the Ukrainian situation with the coalition of the willing, where we're bringing the Brits back into Europe in a way, and France and UK and maybe Germany also taking leadership. Unfortunately, it's not going too fast forward right now, but I think there's a great potential to have a more active role in Europe and communicate through that what it means for the citizens.
Thank you so much. I would like to open up for the audience for one questions to Eva or Sami. So please raise your hand if you have a question and state your name and organization. And if not, I have still several questions left myself. So
difficult one.
That's totally okay. Okay, I have asked you both several times this week if we would have this type of conversation. I will not say 1 year this time, I promise you, Sami. I will say
we had 20 years yesterday.
20 years yesterday, yeah. So, okay, we take it down to 5 years from now. Where are we at in orders of military cooperation from a Swedish, Finnish, and maybe also European perspective?
Wow. It's so hard to say, because 5 years ago, could you assess where you are today?
No.
You had no idea. So it's super hard. I would like to have that crystal ball just to look into the future, just 5 years ahead. Have no idea, but I can hope that we have even further increased our cooperation and even further actually have a huge growth in our defense forces, not only in the military purposes, but also the civilian defense, and integrated that together, because the civilian and the military defense, the national defense as a whole, that is a national issue. And we need to get strong together, national-wise as well, but also increase our cooperation and the defense purposes together with absolutely Finland, but also in the alliance.
I think that's a great answer, because we don't only know where we are 5 years from, we don't know where we are at tomorrow. So thank you, Sami.
Yeah, 5 years from now is 2030, so we still have about 5 years to go until 5% of the GDP, I think, which is good. We have permanent NATO forces in Finland, Sweden, maybe also Norway. I kind of referred to my answer yesterday, but most of the people were not here, luckily. So the troops can go back and forth easily there are no borders. You can move their equipment. The roads are in perfect condition. The bridges can carry the heavy tanks. And we have a clear role within NATO to defend the northern flank of the alliance. And at the same time, the European defense industry is producing magnificent material for the member states effectively without any national interest.
That's also a great answer. I would like to take the opportunity to thank you and Sami for standing up with my hard questions and my curiosity to draw from your knowledge during this week.
You are the pro.
Thank you.
Thank you. A warm applause.
Thank you.
Time flies during interesting conversation. Now it's my great honor to welcome Mikael Frisell, Director General for Sweden's Civil Contingency Agency. It's my great honor also to welcome soon Jonas Jonsson, but also Axel Hagelstam, Director for Research at NESA in Finland, and also Jonas Jonsson, CEO of 4C Strategies. A big round of applause. Welcome to all three of you. Mikael, I would like to start by asking you that one key message in the report is the importance of long-time investments in readiness. How is MSB working to ensure that civil preparedness is not just reactive, but also embedded in strategic planning and resource allocation?
That's a very, very good question, of course.
Thank you.
But first of all, I think we have very, very clear guidance from the government, as the minister stated. We have also now the resources coming, the financing, and that is a very, very good start. So we have all opportunities on the table. I have, if I'll use that word, a command group in the society, where I have the possibility to meet all Director Generals for the agencies responsible for the sectors, and also the 6 governors responsible for the regions. There we try to discuss how to use the guidance for the government and the resources in the best way, so we can have the fastest, so we can build capabilities out in the field as fast as possible. And then also, of course, all the time it's important to talk and communicate, dialogue, listen to the local level, to the municipalities. Because if you're going to develop capabilities and preparedness, you're doing that out on the ground on the local level, not on national level in papers or PowerPoints, as the minister said. So I have also a channel behind this civil defense command structure, where I listen to the municipalities, I talk to them, I use the SKR organization in Sweden, and also try to find out what are needed out there and then talk to the governors, because the governors are responsible and they need to involve the local level even better than we are doing today, because everybody need to be around the table, even of course the private sector. So that is the strategy I use in order to have effect fast out on the ground.
Sounds very clear, and I also believe that you have, since you entered office, so to say, you have had a lot of focus on communication, leading by clarity. Am I right on that point?
I think it's very, very important for me right now to have a lot of key leader engagement, because civil defense, it's more or less it's the whole society except the military, of course. I have more or less 1,000 actors. That is really, really important. 290 municipalities, maybe 300 private companies, 21 regions, a lot of agencies. So key leader engagements is important, because cooperation, you need to have relations. You need to discuss. Here we have the goals from the government. Here is what we should achieve, and then discuss about that. Therefore, I'm out and dialogue and communicate and listen a lot these first months at my job.
Sounds like a great strategy. How do you believe that is dialogue and communication the way of operationalizing the link between national contingency planning, vice versa, the municipalities and the local governments?
That is one important strategy to have, but we can take Gotland as an example. We know Gotland has a challenge with, I don't know exact the same right word in English, but the water level here on Gotland. And on regular basis, the municipalities report to the governors, the regions, and the regions report to MSB. And we create the situational operational picture on the civil defense on a regular basis. And we have seen and discussed with Gotland, and we have a challenge here. And right now we have personnel from MSB working together with the region here on the island of Gotland in order to support, give advice, and so on. So it's really important that you have a close cooperation, not just dialogue. You need to be there and help and support and give advice. So that is one example how we try to involve and support and share information and give advice.
In order also to close the gaps,
yeah,
maybe.
Close the gaps.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Axel, warmly welcome to Visby. Not your first time, though. No, Axel, you represent NESA. And from your point of view, what are the most important perspectives in the Safer Together report? There's a lot. Choose two.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the many great values of the Safer Together report is that it states jointly and commonly the severe security situation that we have currently. It doesn't circle around. It states the security situation as it is, as in its full severity, and that's a great service to us all. A second great benefit of that report is that it identifies the need for a whole of government approach, where all societal actors, all public sector actors have a responsibility to keep their functions, their work running also in crisis. Plus, it states the need for a whole society approach, which then extends that same logic into the private sector, which is essentially the provider of critical services, critical production, critical infrastructure, innovation, and so on, where society can simply not exist and function without the services by the private sector. And then, of course, the third sector, organizations such as the Red Cross or other extremely important functions in society. And then finally, of course, the population and the individual citizens themselves, in stating the fact that they also have a responsibility to make sure that they can survive in crisis situations and not just externalize everything to society. and to the government to take care of them. But everyone has to identify their own responsibility in maintaining preparedness.
Are there any specific points in the report that NESA has started to work upon to elaborate what you can do more or build upon, or your own capabilities?
I think there's many things that we work on in the report, and I think the report reflects very, to a large extent, the logic, along which we've built resilience and security of supply in Finland, which starts from the point that I just mentioned about the necessity of a dialogue and co-planning with the private sector. And here, I think, the great benefit of the report is that it takes that logic and applies it on the internal market. And for us, of course, as a peripheral open economy in the northeastern corner of the single market in the European community, isolated by the Baltic Sea, dependent on maritime transport, it's great to have a joint logic in the entire single market, which states that the single market has to continue operating, also in crisis situations. It has to be able to adapt itself. My microphone's not working. All right. Should I repeat everything?
From the start, my friend. No.
Okay, 4 pages again. No, where was I? So to keep the economic flows going, because the logic that I just mentioned really stems from the outset that security of supply and resilience is where economy and national security really crosses. It's where the dependency between the economy and the national security and the functioning of society really can be found. And this applied on the single market gives a great boost and benefit to also maintaining Finnish and Nordic resilience and security of supply. So just a few of the great number of benefits and good recommendations from the report.
Thank you very much, Axel. That's a great start. Jonas, the Director General mentioned the importance. I can take that. The Director General mentioned the importance of the private sector, and for a company working both with the military and the civil side of the total defense context, what are, from your point of view, the current obstacles for real civil-military private cooperation? And what examples do we have that really works?
Thank you, Minu. Yeah, that's a small question. No, but I think it's the same challenges really that we see around all of these areas right now. There's so many things happening so quickly, and we're coming from a position where, you know, there's been a tectonic shift in terms of what we need to achieve in terms of preparedness and in terms of how we are prepared within the society and within our organizations to act today. So I think that there are a couple of key elements that needs to come into place and continue to come into place. And I was thinking about it as we listened to the speeches this morning. And I think one of the key areas is understanding between the private sector and the government sector, and to continue to enhance that understanding in terms of how we operate and how the government agencies operate, and to continue to collaborate tighter in terms of how we can do things. I think the other thing, and I think we've seen some quite remarkable examples of that this morning and this week, is the leadership which is required from our government officials during this time in terms of actually standing up and pushing so hard in all these different areas, which is required right now. Because the challenge that everyone from Minister Bohlin to Eva and Sami and Mikael Frisell are facing right now are quite vast. There are so many things that need to happen in so many areas, and it needs to happen very quickly. And then I think from our perspective, so forces strategies, we've been working with exercises and training management and enhancing capabilities for the past 25 years. And I think that that's the key area when it comes to both the military preparedness, which is happening right now, and the cooperation between the different states in that area, but also in terms of the civil-military part, is the exercising components. We need to come together and spend time in terms of practicing, training, and doing that in the right structured way to achieve the outcomes which are, you know, set from the government and throughout the organization, saying this is where we need to get to and to train that and to do that in a structured way, and to trust each other a little bit more, maybe in all parts of society, to be able to do that.
That's great. I think the report also states the importance of structured cross-border training and exercising. What is your view on that?
No, I think it's critical. I mean, you know, as a company that delivers, as I said, exercise management systems around the world, we are part of the big exercises which have been delivered in the Mediterranean this year, in the Atlantic, also a major exercise in Asia Pacific coming up now called Talisman Sabre. And it's clear in all these different areas that one of the key components is how do we work more together between nations? How do we actually practice everything from standard operating procedures to how we communicate, how we, you know, tactics, how we engage, and that goes for the military side of the business, but also I think it needs to now continuously increase in the civilian side of the house, so that we can rely on support from different areas within different parts of what we do from our neighbors, so that we can do it more efficiently in terms of building specific capabilities in Finland, specific capabilities in Norway, specific capabilities in Sweden, and then rely on each other to help out in those areas.
And building, as Eva and Simon mentioned, building upon our strength. Mikael, what would you say are the greatest obstacles that MSB faces in ensuring coordination between the civilian and military planning structures? Coming from the military structures.
First of all, I would like to say that we have a very valuable ongoing military civil planning in Sweden. For instance, the Chief of Defense and I have work to do. We will present I call it a report or a book or handbook or something like that in mid-September, where we have taken the decisions from the government and written down what does this mean, what are we going to achieve, and what are the consequences for the society if this happens. So there are a lot of scenarios from the strategic plan that Eva talked about, the national plan. So we have a very good ongoing planning. We have planned together regarding NATO response measures on national level. We have a very, very good host nation support planning on the regional level. So we have a lot of planning ongoing. But I think the biggest challenge in the civil defense area is the diversity within the civil defense. 1,000 actors that are really, really key actors, and have this planning on national level, regional level, and local level, and involve all key actors. I think that is the most critical on the civil side. And then I think, again, when we're now building relations in Sweden between the civil side and the military side on all levels, I think this will start happening. You don't need to guide it. It will start happening if you have relations. And I think Eva agree here. And I think we have started very, very well. I think I hope that we have our plans in place the coming years.
Meaning that we hopefully have what we call in Sweden the catch-up effect.
Yeah, and I also would like to say that we have because I have my personal friend from Finland here, we have a really good planning together with Finland also in the secure supply area. We have operational planning ongoing regarding protection of the population, mass evacuation, cross borders. We will exercise that. I will go to Finland in October. I think the minister will be there also. So there is a lot of ongoing also between the nations, and we have a lot of exercises together with the military side. We have the NATO exercise Steadfast that has been conducted just, So there is a lot of things ongoing now. So I think we are on the right way.
That's a clear message. What is your view, Axel?
Well, I fully agree, and I want to say thank you to Mikael and to Minister Bohlin for the excellent leadership and reach out to Finland that you've shown. We've, like Mikael said, we have a lot going on, and we will have more. And I think here again is the logic that I think you mentioned here, building on each other's strengths, where we have vulnerabilities, and Sweden may have other vulnerabilities where we may have then strengths instead, and we can in this mutual beneficial mode, help each other plug those vulnerabilities. That's the same logic that I would like to see applied also on a European level, where we, inside of the internal market, have individual member states with individual weaknesses and strengths, where the Commission really could, in a significant way, support countries in teaming up and working together on these. But then we also have joint vulnerabilities, where the entire internal market has deficiencies in, for example, semiconductor-related production or pharmaceutical production, active pharmaceutical ingredients for antibiotics or other types of really critical and particularly conflict-critical pharmaceuticals. Then we have the digital sector, where there's significant deficiencies in European production there as well. Not to talk about the financial sector, payment systems, for example, entirely reliant on European actors. So there's a lot of external dependencies that we share as well, where I think the European Union can and should do a lot.
That's great. My main aim here is to ask so much hard questions that we need to continue this dialogue in Stockholm. So Jonas, from your point of view as a private actor, what would you like to see more of in regards to how we work more in regards to interoperability together from all spectrums? What is your view on that?
And I think we've had this conversation a number of times during the week. I think, and I mentioned it earlier as well, from my perspective and from our perspective, it's very refreshing to see, as I said, the change that is happening. But I think we need to continue to enhance that working together and trusting each other in the early stages of figuring out how we solve the problems that we're now facing. Because I think that there are a lot of great ideas in industry, and we can provide a lot of innovation, but we need to get close to both the decision makers, the people who are actually working, and the understanding of the problem, so that we can continually enhance the process of solving those problems. So there is some things that needs to come into place in terms of how we can do that from a procurement perspective and how we can work together from an innovation perspective. I think that there are some areas in terms of legislation where I would like to see progress around export control within certain regions and things like that, so you could break down barriers which are hindering innovation at the moment. So I think that there are things like that we can continue to enhance. I think we're, as Mikael said as well, I think we're making great progress. But I do genuinely believe that there is a requirement to bring industry and government closer together, and figuring out how to do that on the wide level as well, so not just on the top level with the big industry primes, or also on the incubator level, both which are super important, but there is a middle layer in between in Sweden, which are representing a lot of these companies that you mentioned earlier, who are a big part of what we are going to try to achieve here over the coming years.
Thank you, Jonas. What is your comment, Mikael?
Totally agree.
Totally agree.
And I'm really glad that I got the task to be a coordinator on national level regarding security supply, because now we have the possibility to implement a structure on all levels. We will have dialogues and discussions and cooperations between public and private sector, and try to establish clear goals so everybody know what to do and what to achieve and when.
If we could summarize this, Mikael, by mentioning, if you could name one blind spot in our current approach to civil readiness that we risk overlooking, what would that be?
Blind spot, risk overlooking.
Or a gap, maybe, if you want to see it like that.
I would like to say like this. We have on the directed general levels and governors level, the last months we have discussed a lot about, if I use that word, the civil defense command structures and our responsibilities. What is my agency's responsibility as to be the leading agency? What is the agency for this sector's responsibility? And what is the governor for the region's responsibilities? So we are prepared to act immediately if something happened now. That has been a focus question the last months, and we have made huge progress. And in mid-August, we will have an exercise on that level with everybody, a tabletop exercise, and discuss 3-4 scenarios in order to elaborate these responsibilities more, because we need to cooperate. 1 + 1 need to be 3, and we should not fight about the task. We need to divide them in a clear and bright way. So that has been a focus area the last months.
So
the command structure in the civil defense.
So basically, if we need to fight tonight, what do we have?
Yeah.
Yes. Axel, what is your view?
Thank you. I'd say two things. First of all, we talked about earlier the benefits of the report, and there's the whole of government, whole of society. I think one thing that's missing is the whole of union approach, where we would have a coherent EU command structure on coordinating not military, but the civilian parts of preparedness. And I'm seeing Sami here winking at me. But the point is that the different DGs in the Commission have different responsibilities, but there's no coordinative function. There's no one taking each of the bits and examining them closely and then putting them back and making sure that they interlink. And that's one thing that I think there's a blind spot. The other one is the planning perspective, where we really need to think about planning for our societies to survive in very severe conditions that have different stages. You have the initial stage of a crisis situation where everything suddenly is messed up, and you need to rely on already at hand solutions such as stockpiling of critical goods, for example. And here there's a lot we can do together in joint stockpiling, for example, and building strategic depth in our material preparedness. But then there's the follow-on stage, a prolonged conflict, if you will, where you need to have, where the stocks will run out, because the stocks eventually only buy you time. And for that second stage, you need contracts in place with production reservations, for example, or alternative production lines with industry where they have the first 3 months or so time to adjust. And then, of course, there's the longer term preparedness for a wartime economy, which we see in Ukraine currently into their 4th year of a full-scale invasion war, that will require significant readjustments of society and economy to be able to cope and maintain the defense operations and the defense of the country.
Axel, if we should start summarizing discussion by giving you the opportunity to say one thing about what you, on behalf of the report and on the future, would like to see more of in regards to cooperation between Sweden and Finland, maybe, what would that be?
Well, I think with regards to Finland and Sweden, like Mikael said, we already have a lot, and we need to follow through with these concrete examples of cooperation, building on material preparedness, infrastructure, for example, digital undersea cables and electricity transfer connections, and many other elements in the critical infrastructure where we can do a lot together. Common agreements with private sector, for example. There's the list is really
the wish list is long.
So I don't think that we have a lack of ideas. We need to get to making them into reality.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And Director General, you mentioned the civil defense command structure, but if you can say one more thing, what would that be?
Yeah, that will be okay. Inside Sweden, we need to be better on the civil side to have förbereda, planera, response planning on national level, how to support the military in a better way, how to use the capabilities we have today if something happened. That planning will start after the summer. I had the possibility to decide to give guidance to the whole civil defense and all agencies from 1st of June. They should be prepared to start this planning. That is inside Sweden. The other thing is that Axel said, together with Finland, work really hard regarding security of supply and joint stockpiling, and also this task that we have, mass evacuation, cross borders, that planning, because that we learned a lot from each other when we are doing this, and it sends positive signals to our populations, both in Finland and Sweden, that the state, both Sweden and Finland, take care of the population, and we are prepared.
And we have focus on the population.
Yep.
That's great, Mark. Jonas, if you can do the same task for you, but not mentioning increased cooperation between public and private sector, what would that be?
I think in that case I would say that continue to push the sense of urgency which we have right now, so that we don't sort of back down into a level of normalness. I think we need to continue to push the sense of urgency, which continues to push action. There's been a lot of discussion this week about percentages, 3.5, 1.5, 5. We need to now, those percentages needs to be converted into action and continue to push that really hard. And to do that, to utilize the amazing innovation capabilities that are now available. So I would say, let's continue to make sure that we retain the sense of urgency, and that we use that to facilitate the massive innovation and the power of innovation which exists both in Sweden and Finland, and to utilize that to help solve the problems.
That's great remarks. And with that said, we have passed 75 minutes, and I would like to take the opportunity to once again thank Minister Bohlin, Turo, Eva, Sami, Axel, the Director General, and Jonas for taking time and sharing their knowledge. And with that said, a warm applause and stay safe together.